Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to hear from what I think is going to be an amazing panel, as well as entrepreneur roundtable that will really give everyone a sense of the opportunities within digital health and wellness. So if you're a student out there that's interested in this field, kind of hang on to your seats, because you're in for a real treat. We got a very diverse panel, great perspectives on the many opportunities there are within health and wellness that you can pursue as you think about different ways that you can have an impact in the world. So how the evening will work. We'll start with our industry panel facilitated by Daniel Haters, who's the managing director of our digital health vertical here at NextCubed. That will be followed by an entrepreneur roundtable of individuals who are right now in the heart of building and growing their companies within the health and wellness space. So as you think about your questions and thoughts, both from an industry perspective as well as areas, if you're an entrepreneur thinking about launching your own business, make sure you post those in the Q&A, and we'll try to do our best to get to as many of them as possible during the event. So without further ado, I'll bring up my good friend Daniel Haters to take us through the industry panel. Floor is yours, Daniel. Oop, I think you're on mute there.
See?
There you go.
All right. There we go. Thank you. So really excited to be here with this group, and it's always a pleasure to interact with students that are really going to be driving the future, especially in this case, the future of healthcare, which is so critical to where we are today. I'm going to start today with a little introduction about digital health, and then I am going to introduce our fantastic industry panel that we have today, both executives at large corporations as well as startups. So digital health is in the midst of a revolution, and it's part of a general healthcare revolution that we see that is being precipitated by exactly the world that we see around us today. And so it's an amazing time to be alive, in quotation marks, right? We stand at the crossroads of the greatest pandemic in 100 years, the greatest social movement in 50 years, the greatest financial crisis in 90 years, but also the greatest population health opportunity in over 200 years. To put it another way, healthcare globally, but especially in the United States, is in crisis. COVID-19 is not created, but rather revealed the cracks in the system for all of us to see. We cannot solve these problems with more people, more hospitals, and more laboratories. However, with great crises comes great opportunity. Digital health has been the future of healthcare for a decade and was predicted to be the future of healthcare in another 10 years. But COVID has changed that math and made the future today. Solutions that only months ago were nice to haves in the healthcare industry are now must haves. The students on the line here today are going to benefit from this by being able to create this future that's literally being built by folks on the ground today right in front of us. We've assembled an eclectic panel to help you understand market trends within healthcare and opportunities to innovate. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel: Isaac Vaughn, COO at Zenefits; Tal Ziv, VP of Strategy at Nike; Mercedes Carnathan, Vice Chair of the Department of Preventive Medicine at Northwestern University; and Ariva Martin, founder and CEO of Butterfly. If you guys could join me now on the panel and unmute. All right, there we go. We have everyone. I still see some mute signs on there. Tal, Mercedes, perfect. Fantastic. So I'd like to start by going around the horn quickly, and we'll get into the things that you're doing today at healthcare. But I'd love if each of you could spend a minute or two telling us a little bit about yourself and your background. Isaac, would you start for us?
Yes, thank you, Daniel, and thanks all for joining today. It's a great opportunity we have to speak to you and share some of our experiences. My background is both in law and business. Upon graduating from law school, I spent 15 years in the private practice representing principally technology companies and, quite frankly, a number of companies that were in the healthcare sector, most notably biopharmaceutical and pharmaceutical companies, both as a company counsel as well as representing underwriters and investors investing in many of these technologies that are playing out today. And then I quickly transitioned from law to business over an initial 5-year period, and then ultimately decided I wanted to really operate as a senior operator in a tech company. And so I'm now the COO of Zenefits. Talk a little bit more in context about what I do and the role we are playing in and around healthcare and the broader benefits ecosystem. So great to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, great. Great to have you, Isaac. Ariva?
Oh, thank you so much, Daniel. Thanks to Marlon and to the entire team at NextQ for putting this together. Super excited to be here. I am not a graduate of an HBCU, but my co-founder, Rodney Bell, is, who you'll hear from later in the program. My background is rather unique. I am a Harvard-trained lawyer, and I practiced civil rights law for the majority of my legal career. And then I became involved in nonprofit work, where I worked with underserved families in the Los Angeles community and really throughout California, working with families who had children and young adults on the autism spectrum and with other developmental disabilities. Started doing a lot of work around the intersectionality between disabilities, social justice, and civil rights. And that's what led me and Rodney to really become the founders and the creators of Butterfly Health. And Butterfly is a digital therapeutic platform really focused on underserved Medicaid populations. I became acutely aware, both as a child who grew up on welfare and Medicaid benefits myself, but also someone who worked with underserved populations for the last decade or so, acutely aware of the tremendous barriers that individuals in underserved communities face in terms of accessing high quality care, particularly in the mental health space. So super excited to be on this journey to make mental health, behavioral health, and wellness technology available to the 90 million people who receive Medicaid benefits throughout the United States.
Thank you, Ariva. Mercedes, could you give the audience a little bit about your background?
Yes, certainly. I suspect that I am the only one here who is actually not in industry and business. I am a professor in the Department of Preventive Medicine at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. I'm an epidemiologist, which, you know, the field has become popular these days in the middle of a pandemic. But in short, what I do is I count people and I count things and try to make associations between behaviors and other exposures and health outcomes in the population. So I think the relevance of my work to this particular topic today is that some of the research that I've done has identified patterns of disease in the population or behavior patterns that warrant intervention and that warrant tracking. And some proportion of my research does use digital tools and devices to be able to monitor and track behaviors over time. So I look forward to learning from my co-panelists.
Fantastic, thank you. And last but not least, Tal.
Hi guys, good afternoon. My name is Tal Ziv. I lead strategy across Nike, Jordan, Converse for product and consumer groups. I have similar to Ariva and Isaac, kind of a very disparate background. I wouldn't say I'm in digital health. I also wouldn't say I'm in the shoes and shirts business, but I started off as in computer development, had a few startups, worked on the deal side, both at GE, and then had a small venture capital fund, and was co-founder of a few startups. One of them actually in the elderly space for assisted living and nursing homes. But now over the last 5 years, been here in Portland, Oregon, serving, basically providing inspiration is what we say for sports across the world through Nike. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So I think everyone here in the audience, you guys are in for a treat today with this discussion. As you can see, from a certain point of view, you would say, what does this eclectic panel have to do with each other? But I think you'll find with today's discussion quite a bit. And so, Mercedes, I'd like to come back to you. Your research as a professor has put you at the forefront of healthcare thought leaders who are moving us from a past where we think about how we treat disease to a future where we think about how we prevent disease. Can you tell us more about your research and your vision for the impact that digital health technologies will play in the future world where we shift from treating disease to maintaining health and creating wellness?
Yeah, I really like your framing of that because prevention is really key. We don't want to wait until people have disease and their quality of life is already impaired to intervene. What we want to do is be able to provide people with tools and resources so that they can maintain their health, so that they can track their health and share that with their healthcare providers. So one portion of my research is related to the device-based assessment of activities over the course of 24 hours. So we use digital devices, wrist-worn, either commercial or research-grade devices, so that we can measure individuals' sleeping patterns, physical activity patterns, even standing and sitting behaviors, because all of those can influence some of our major chronic illnesses, focusing primarily on obesity as an example. How much we sleep, when we sleep, how we time our physical activity, and even our eating around these other activities and behaviors can influence our health. And so, we run research studies to try to identify these relationships. And then ultimately, there's a field of our science that is dissemination and implementation, which is to say, how do we take research patterns or patterns of association that we've detected in well-controlled research studies using research-grade devices and disseminate those to the population. And that's where we're always seeking out partners so that we could use commercial devices to be able to allow individuals to track and promote their own health and share those with their physicians for regular tracking and monitoring.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think where you're going, what I hear within that is changing behavior to change health. I hear IoT devices, data sharing, education, health literacy, personalized medicine. And it's amazing that all of these things are coming together in one place simultaneously at one time as well. So picking up on Mercedes' research themes, Ariva, you're an immensely successful Harvard-trained attorney, yet recently you decided to co-found a digital health company that was based on creating a culturally sensitive, culturally intelligent digital therapeutic product built but encapsulated in a behavioral health solution for underserved populations. Now that's a lot of buzzwords in there, and I think you gave the audience a little bit of an understanding of why you built something like that based on your background. But I was hoping you could dig in a little bit more there to allow the audience to understand why Butterfly is needed. Why is it that digital health can solve the problem that Butterfly was built for? And really, what has been the reaction in the market to a company that's building something who by definition is focused on a group that's been underserved and been ignored for all this time? So I'll start with the first. Why is Butterfly needed in this world? We're spending $3.5 trillion a year on healthcare. How is it that we have people that are slipping through the cracks?
Okay, first, Daniel, that is an incredibly compound question. So all of my lawyers on the panel, you guys can back me up on that. That is like 500 questions in one, but I'm going to try to unpack it.
Let's start with why Butterfly is needed.
Butterfly is needed because despite the fact that we are spending trillions of dollars on healthcare in this country, we're not doing a really good job, particularly as it relates to serving underserved populations. Underserved individuals face tremendous barriers, particularly when accessing mental health care, issues of stigma, issues of access to providers in their own communities, issues of just the cultural inability to find providers that can address their cultural needs oftentimes create situations where people with the greatest needs, the greatest mental health needs, don't seek those services out. And what we see is an exacerbation in all kinds of other physical illnesses. And I'm sure Mercedes sees this in her practice. So people with mental health issues, rather than addressing those, end up in emergency rooms. They end up overutilizing their primary care physicians. They end up overutilizing medications. And what we know is that if we could provide an intervention, if we could get an intervention to address the anxiety, the depression, some of those emotional and mental health issues, we can impact the physical health and outcomes, particularly for low-income individuals in this country. And the reality is Medicaid is the largest provider of mental health services in the United States. And despite that fact, and that is a fact, when you look around, you still see so little information available, so little research and data has been collected on this Medicaid population. So what Butterfly is seeking to do is to provide a digital solution. At the same time that COVID-19 is creating just a tsunami of mental health issues, there was a recent report out by Boston University where they did a study, and there's a direct correlation between the economic impact on low-income wage earners and depression. And I was interviewing the lead investigator of this study, and I says, okay, you've now figured this out, that there's a straight line between being hit hard economically by COVID-19 and depression, but how are those individuals treating their depression? And she says, quite frankly, most of them are not. They're not to treat, their depressive symptoms and conditions. And what we hope to do through Butterfly is give them a solution, give them a way to seek help and assistance for those symptoms of depression, to make them, to make people better, to give people better health, better wellness outcomes, and to do that in a digital way, because that makes it scalable. Even if we could send every individual that is on Medicaid to a mental health professional, we really couldn't, because there's just not enough people available to provide those services. So Butterfly hopes to solve that problem by offering a solution that's on your phone, on your iOS phone, on your Android phone, that's available 24/7, that's private, that is culturally sensitive, and hopefully help people start to realize some better health outcomes. That's Butterfly in a nutshell. That's and 40 of your 500 questions.
I apologize for that. Yeah, I think what's important that I wanted the audience really to take away, both from what you're doing, but where the market is as well, is that even though we're spending over $3.5 trillion a year, that it seems amazing that there are underserved populations, but it's real, right? There are people that are suffering and they're receiving essentially zero healthcare and certainly zero preventative healthcare, and you're filling that void. And to your point as well that you were just making, I think I don't want it to be lost on the audience that really it's only digital health that can solve this problem, because of the ability to efficiently scale and reach all of these folks who are currently underserved. And so I think it's really important to talk about not just, okay, here's a problem, here's how much money we're spending, but the who and how do we reach them. And I think you're picking up on some of the things Mercedes, her research focuses on, and really operationalizing them in the community, which I think is amazing. Now, one of the things, though, that I also wanted to get into, and I apologize for the string of questions, was the reaction to what you're building from strategic healthcare companies in the marketplace. Yeah. And so what are they saying, or how are they reacting to what you're building? How are they partnering with you right now?
The reaction has been incredibly positive, Daniel, and I think for a couple of reasons. Butterfly is the right solution at the right time, and Rodney and I are really the right founders for the solution. As we watch the protests unfold over the summer months related to the murder of George Floyd, there became this intense focus in this country around all kinds of inequities, not just with respect to policing, but with other areas in this country where there were issues, pervasive issues of systemic racism and inequities. And the healthcare system is one of those systems that has been under a spotlight since the George Floyd murder in May. And so health plans, health organizations, Medicaid plans, insurance companies are all looking internally and externally for ways that they can address and be a part of the solution in addressing some of these health inequities. And working with Black founders, working on a digital application that is mission driven like Butterfly is to address underserved communities is in the sweet spot of so many of the health plans and organizations that we've been in contact with. And we are in serious discussions with some of the biggest health organizations in the country, like Kaiser, like the Blues, Anthem, and Shield. And they are all looking internally and asking how can they better meet the needs of a population that is and continues to be underserved. So we are finding that these health plans and health organizations are really opening their doors in ways that I'm not sure would have happened, post George Floyd and post COVID-19, because COVID-19 also, as we all know, has disproportionately impacted communities of color. So African American Latinos have been the hardest hit, both from infection rates, death rates, the economic fallout. So again, these health plans are really trying to hone in on how they can meet the needs of these underserved communities really throughout this country. So really excited about the opportunities that it provides for Butterfly to partner with some of these big health plans and systems.
Yeah, and I think one thing for context again for our students that are in the audience as well is that by ignoring these populations, the reality in the marketplace is that folks go through much of their life with very little medical care, large portions of our population. And from a certain perspective, you say, well, we're not spending money on them. How is our healthcare spending so great? The problem is what happens is poor behavioral patterns start to develop around healthcare choices, and then that explodes into massive costs later in life, right? And those costs, once someone is sick with a chronic condition, that you never stop having a chronic condition once you're diagnosed with it. And so the key here is actually we need to spend money up front. And I think some of your partners have realized that they need to spend money up front. And if they spend money up front, they will be able to relieve themselves of the burden of these exceptionally high medical costs for treating cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, et cetera, later on in life. And I think that's the real arithmetic here. And then part of the real opportunity for some of our student entrepreneurs in the audience is to think about how they can capture this massive change of where the healthcare industry is spending money and believes they need to spend money from disease treatment into disease prevention and wellness, and be able to capture that value and be a part of the change. And Ariva, you're right on the forefront of this. Yeah, and congratulations with your company's success to date. Tal, I want to turn to you now. Mercedes and Ariva have clearly demonstrated that the future of healthcare is wellness, not simply the treatment of disease. And companies like Peloton and Sleep Number, which 10 years ago would have been defined as consumer goods companies, are now viewed as digital health and wellness companies that are part of the solution to our country's healthcare crisis. As a senior executive at Nike, I imagine that this puts you and Nike in a very exciting position to drive not just iconic sports apparel brand, but be at the forefront of the future of healthcare. Because what Nike has always been about sports and about health and about human expression of themselves through athletics, that's now merging with the healthcare crisis that is part of the solution. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about how Nike specifically and your industry in general is evolving and developing digital health solutions to meet the call of the time.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I think you said it in terms of wellness. We don't think of ourselves as a digital health company, as no one would, I think, in terms of Nike, but definitely within wellness and probably more in the preventive care, right? Movement. We have an internal vision of making sport a daily habit, and sport being anything you want it to be, essentially, as long as you're moving, right? If you're having walking meetings, if you're actually playing sport on the pitch and doing those kind of things. And that's something that we do internally with our employees, but also try and, when we think about sort of all the way from big campaigns that we do from a marketing perspective down to individual sports and individual products, how do we actually motivate people to move? But movement is just one component of when we think about athleticism and what makes someone a kind of well-rounded athlete. There's 5 components. One is movement, and we've obviously been in that space for almost 50 years now. From a digital perspective, we have a few very strong apps that are out there with regard to the Nike Running Club and the Nike Training Club. We were ahead of our time with a fuel band. Some of you guys might have remembered that we disbanded and then actually became a pretty large market. And we've had a large and a significant partnership with Apple over the last, I'd say, 10 years. Tim Cook's on our board. And so from a health and wellness perspective, it's been very close in partnership with Apple. From a movement perspective, also, I would say, sorry, go ahead.
The running app told me this morning that I need to get off out of my chair and get moving. It sent me a reminder this morning. So I have a firsthand account of how it's your technology is forcing people to, well, forcing is the wrong word, encouraging people to move around.
Yeah, that's great. Did it work though? Did you get up?
I did. I did.
So one of the things we're also just
Good for you, Daniel.
technological like guilt and peer pressure from your phone, but it made me move.
Yeah, which is great. I think also for we talked about kind of underserved a second ago with Ariba. I think that we also focus quite a bit on underserved markets from a movement perspective and from a sports perspective. If you think about inner cities and underserved communities that have less access to green space, that have less access to courts and to equipment. And so there's a lot of our investments that we do in those spaces, but also trying to think when we do it in a city, we have 12 key cities around the world that we focus on. Those are very limited, right? We can only do it in so many physical cities. We try and focus, especially most recently, on making those very leverageable sort of digital plays. And so we've done some partnerships with TikTok to get kids moving and having movement challenges that have been really successful with Ronaldo and some of our big athletes. And so I think that's in the movement bucket. Of the 5 buckets, 5 facets of athleticism, there's also nutrition, and we do some education about that. I think there's a big opportunity with the nutrition that Nike's probably not going to get after, but in terms of personalized nutrition, that gets very, very specific in terms of what your goals are, but also sort of who you are, your genetics and your blood makeup and where you need to be. There's recovery, as you guys can think of, like stretching, but also all the hyperspace or hyper-rice recovery mechanisms that we have a partnership with as well. And then the last two that I'm most passionate about are sleep and mindset. And sleep again, probably not within Nike's wheelhouse per se in terms of a product, but there's some partnership that we worked on with regard to sleep. Sleep probably has the biggest upside for humanity. It's probably the most important drug for athletes, if you will, right? If you think about it that way, if you can maximize the time people are in bed, not just encouraging them to spend more time in bed, but actually maximizing the time that they are in bed. And the benefits that you have, not just to your physical, but also mental capacity, is huge. And so there's some interesting in the space, not within Nike specifically, in the space of a solution to encourage that. I'd say that's actually probably at like a super immature space right now, even though there's a lot of investments and companies that are trying to play in that and then try and pitch and work with Nike. There's no silver bullet. Not that there will be, but there's nothing even close to that, I think, yet in the sleep space, but there will be, I'd say. And then finally in mindset, and Ariba talked about it a second ago, but mindset is one component of it is sort of like headspace and meditation, but it's really more about how you go through your day, right? What are the greatest athletes out there say to themselves when they're down? And how do they do self-talk? And what are the best practices that we've leveraged from athletes, our best athletes, that then translate to our worst athletes like myself, about just getting through the day, and how do we make that work? From a digital perspective, that's something that we're digitizing more in terms of our apps. So both through like our commerce apps, but also our movement apps of Nike Run Club, Nike Training Club. And then the only thing I'd mention, just to kind of wrap this all together, is, well, we were ahead of our time with regard to Fuel Band. We have worked for the last several years on adaptive footwear, which are kind of gimmicky, of like self-lacing shoes and those kind of things. But you can imagine they're also embedding Trojan horses of just data gathering of how people are playing on pitch. We have people playing with the adaptive basketball shoes on NBA games. We have next versions of it for running and for just kind of sportswear that people are wearing throughout the city, that then tie into your watches, and you can get a more holistic view of the athlete and how to then use that information to give better guidance to meet their needs.
Yep. Yeah, and it's amazing to hear this, because it does all tie together. The same things that you're speaking about: sleep, nutrition, behavioral choices related to your physical nature, but also mindfulness as well. All of these things, I think I heard in different words, streaming through what, Mercedes, you were talking about your research and Ariba with the company that you've started. And so it's amazing to see how these are all merging, even though, you're an executive Nike, Ariba, you're launching a startup, and Mercedes, you're a research professor at a tier 1 research university. But everyone is essentially working in a world that's merging together, which is fascinating and might not be apparent to the rest of the world at first glance. I appreciate you walking us through it. So Isaac, to bring you back into the conversation, in the old way of the world and healthcare, some folks might think of your company, of Zenefits, as simply a digital HR platform. But if you look a little closer, just like I think we looked at Nike just now, what I see is a digital health company that empowers employees and employers to properly and efficiently access the healthcare system around them, how and when they need it. For instance, I know the Zenefits electronic data interchange allows Zenefits customers to exchange benefits-related information with carriers, and the digital nature of the platform allows small and medium businesses now the opportunities to offer healthcare solutions to their employees that were once reserved for only the employees of the biggest companies in the world. And so I personally look at you guys from the outside as you guys are an access point and breaking down the walls of access in many ways. So I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about your initiatives at Zenefits and how you see the company helping to shepherd in the future of healthcare.
Absolutely, and I'll echo what Mercedes said during her segment. I love the way you have framed this, and if I wasn't mistaken, I would have had you sitting in one or more of our leadership meetings as we talk about what we actually do. Our mission as a company, we talk about leveling the playing field for the other 99.7%, and that actually represents the number of companies in the US with less than 500 employees. There are 6 million of them. And of that 6 million, half of them are employers with less than 50 employees, which means the ACA is not mandated, so they don't actually have to provide benefits. But that's a lot of employees that are working who don't necessarily have access to benefits. And so part of what we see our mission to be is to make that easy, to make it accessible, and to make it effective. So our business really centers around 3 products, all built on a single code base: HR, payroll, and benefits administration. And you touched on the EDI connectivity that we have with carriers. That's been something that Zenefits has been doing from its inception, when it started initially as a benefits broker. And then in 2017, we pivoted to be a full-fledged SaaS platform where we were no longer giving the software away, but we're actually charging for these 3 modules, either on a standalone basis or all in one. And so what that effectively has allowed us to do, particularly in the context of healthcare, is it has allowed us to be an access point, a point of distribution in an efficient way to these small and medium-sized businesses. And what's really starting to play out in real time is the following. In addition to the EDI connectivity, carriers, and when I take carriers, think medical, dental, vision, but also ancillary. life, disability, and increasingly voluntary telemedicine, whether it's Butterfly Health or others that are coming, because people recognize that this is a very efficient way to get a one-to-many touch point off of a common platform that many of these companies sit. And this, your statement about, making it available in ways that are typically only available to the large companies are so true. The other thing that you said, which is also very relevant to our business and how it's playing out today, is a pandemic has taken things that are nice to haves and have made them table stakes essential. And if you think about the small business, they're least equipped to pivot and turn in the directions you need to go if you're operating 100% remote. But now, with technology being what it is and the accessibility of it, and we're doing our part in the way that we do it, these connection points are easily established. So how else are we seeing it play out? So you talk about traditional HR versus what we are today. So in addition to onboarding employees and paying employees, we also enhanced our HR suite of products, if you will, to incorporate health and wellness through a partnership that we have with Thrive, Ariana Huffington's company, where through our platform, we're able to serve up content that's relevant to an employee, whether it's because they just had their first child and the stresses and strains of being a new parent. I just got promoted and the stress of managing more people. I'm experiencing burnout. What are some of the things that I can do? I'm increasingly feeling isolated because I no longer go into the office and engage with my colleagues like I normally do. How do I help manage? So having content and to be able to serve that up, that is a broader set of HR requirements that businesses need, including the small business. So we look at, work and the future of work increasingly being dependent upon providing these types of tools and ultimately experiences that allow employers to meet the full needs of their employees. We talk about, our most important assets in the software business go home every night. Those are the people. So the care and feeding and well-being of that workforce is critical to your overall success. So for us, the future is happening faster. The pandemic has taught us that a lot of things can be accomplished in a remote-only environment. We've actually seen many of our key operating metrics improve as opposed to go the other way. That being said, different sets of challenges as a result of this whipsaw that we've now experienced in this new reality. The last thing I'd say, the real driver, all of this, even going back to the carriers and pushing more and more for API connectivity, is the fact that the workforce is increasingly being made up of millennials and Gen Zs, digital natives who can procure almost everything that they want to manage their lives online and through a certain shopping experience. We're seeing the same thing when it comes to benefits. We call it the consumerization of benefits. So we actually have a tool where you can come to our site, you can search for benefits. We have a huge plan library that we built going back to when we were a broker, where you can then compare and contrast and then ultimately select what you want and check out and then ultimately be implemented on the other side. That is the future. There is no going back. And even the small business can't get away from that reality because this new workforce, these young folks who we're talking to, they have expectations, they have demands about what their experience needs to be. And once they provide you the relevant data that allows you to do what you do, they expect you to make that data increasingly relevant to them. So in the same way that people say they're in the data business, we're all one way or the other, some more direct than others, in the health and wellness business as well.
I love it. And I hope, again, I come back to the audience and student entrepreneurs here. I hope you can see both. There's a wealth of backgrounds that can allow you to change the future of healthcare and wellness, but there's also a variety of roles to be played. With Isaac and Zenefit providing access and making folks' life easier so they can access the systems that Mercedes and Arriva are building, but also you can go and be a part of a company, iconic brand like Nike, and we're in a world where their focus on health has now turned into a focus on healthcare, and they can truly drive a change that Mercedes research is showing us all is possible, and Arriva's company is also bringing to the market. So there's just this wealth of opportunities, and I hope everyone can see what appeared maybe on the surface is a very eclectic group, which it is in terms of talent and abilities and background, is basically all working to solve the same problem, just from different entry points, which to me is very exciting, and why I was honestly excited to moderate this panel. Now it looks like we've got about 5 minutes left before we have the Entrepreneurs Roundtable. And so with that last 5 minutes, I'd love to go around the horn to each of you and talk about, if you were starting a healthcare technology business today, what issue would you target and why? And then, the cherry on top for the folks in the audience is that if you have any piece of advice for them, right? Not just what you would target and why, but maybe a little bit of a life lesson along the way when it comes to building something, right? Or taking the step into the abyss, potentially of entrepreneurship, or into the unknown in this space. So Mercedes, I'll come back to you to start, and love to hear your ideas about where you believe that there's white space, and maybe any advice that you have to the students that are in the audience.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had not ever thought about building a business, but having consulted with people in this space, I think what is critically important is that decisions about building a business and the approaches need to be grounded in a scientific foundation. So I would really encourage and promote an evidence-based approach. From my perspective, the leading challenge that we face as a society right now is obesity. And I bring that up. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly demonstrated that obese individuals with chronic diseases are having the worst outcomes. The top 3 leading causes of death: coronary heart disease, chronic lung diseases, even Alzheimer's and stroke, share as risk factors obesity. And so I would look for things in the space that help people with daily monitoring and tracking of their behaviors, because the evidence foundation shows that individuals who track and monitor their behavior, that is an effective strategy for weight maintenance and behavior change. And I think, like Tal, much of my research actually happens to be focused in sleep. Sleep is very relevant. It is important to everybody. Everybody has to sleep. It is an imperative. And ways in which we can promote healthy sleep and healthy sleep environments, I think, can have a significant impact on individuals' overall health. And
Awesome.
the tip I would give to students really is persistence. You will face many barriers, particularly if you're trying to change paradigms. People are going to say, oh no, that doesn't make sense, or we've never done it that way before. As soon as I hear we've never done it that way before, that is an opportunity to fill a gap.
I love it. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Arriva, you're right on the front line of doing this, right? You took a jump into the abyss recently. So I think your opinion on this, obviously is very current. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts are in terms of what to target or who to target, definitely women. When we were thinking about Butterfly and starting the Butterfly Health Company, initially our focus was going to be exclusively women. We've since expanded the application to include everyone, but women are the decision makers in pretty much every household, no matter if it's an African American, it's a Latino, it's a white. Women are making the buying decisions. So any product that you develop that has a key component that resonates with women, you're going to be successful. And Butterfly does have so much of what we do, and obviously being an African American woman, my brand is all over the Butterfly company. So I would say, one, think about what women want, what women need, and you're not going to go wrong with women as your focus. In terms of a tip, I would say pretty similar to what Mercedes said about being discouraged when you hear the word no, or when people try to discourage you. The number one thing you have to overcome is your own fear. So I consider myself a serial entrepreneur. I've started multiple companies, and I was just chatting with one of the students about how does a lawyer get involved in the healthcare industry? And I said, well, very easily, because at the heart of it, I'm a businesswoman and I'm a builder. So if you are a builder, I say to myself, I can build, a nonprofit, I can build a legal firm. I have a service industry that I built with my husband, and now I'm building a healthcare company. So if you have leadership and entrepreneurial skills, you can work across industries. So I have tremendous, folks on our team, the Butterfly team, who are health experts. They are public health experts, they're medical experts, and they bring that subject matter expertise. But what I bring is the ability to bring people together and to lead teams and to build from scratch. So if you have those skills, this is the industry for you. And we need lots more women. We need lots more women of color, because the numbers are abysmal. And I'm trying to help change that. And then obviously, like I do with everything in my life, I'm reaching back and bringing up other women and women of color. So for the students out there, don't be discouraged, be encouraged, because if there ever was a moment for women of color to enter the health tech field, this is that moment.
Yeah, well, and I can attest to that. I'm 41. I met my wife when I was 19 in college. She happens to be a woman of color, and I haven't made a decision in 22 years. So.
And she controls the
and you're the better for it.
Smart man, you're a very smart man.
Tala, I'll turn it over to you for a quick comment about white space and any advice.
Yeah, I'd say, and I said it before, and Mercedes mentioned it before too. I think within the sleep area, if you're looking for high risk, high return, I think that's the place to hunt. If you're looking for kind of outside startup returns, that's the place I think where, again, high risk, because there's no real solution there. You got to figure it out. But the potential impact is massive around society. In terms of tip, I would say very similar to what Ariva said too, but like one of the questions in the Q&A was, hey, I don't have expertise in this space. All the better, right? All the better that you come to it with a new, fresh perspective. You'll surround yourself with people that do have it and take what they have, like learn from them, but also question why it is the status quo that it is today and what has been done before and what you can do differently. That's what you want to come in with, right? You want to have that new, fresh perspective. So take advantage of that and think of that as a benefit as opposed to a sort of a detriment or a detractor.
I love that. I encourage folks that intern for our portfolio companies and for NextCube as well to speak up when they have thoughts, because they're new, they are not tied down by the dogma that probably infects a lot of the thinking of the folks on this board, right? Experience is great, but experience can also tie you to dogma and the way things have always been done. And so, of course, you want to be well researched when you step up to the plate. But if you are, I encourage the younger members of our team to constantly step up for that reason. I think that's fantastic advice. And Isaac, I'll give you the last word on this in terms of white space that you see, and also advice that you would give to the students in the audience today.
Yeah, I'll take a slightly different turn on it. I mean, white space is great, and I think there's ample opportunity to continue to innovate. But I'd also emphasize to the students that making existing systems more efficient, better, more effective is a huge opportunity. I remind people all the time, Google was not the first search engine, but they optimized search and figured out a way to monetize it in ways that their predecessors didn't. And when you go back to healthcare and what we spend, and yet so many people are not being served, that tells you there's massive inefficiencies. There are inverted incentives. And the only thing that changes it is competition and different ways. So part of what we're seeing, even in our existing business, our companies are figuring out alternatives to the ACA plans. Better, cheaper healthcare and other related coverage at price points that are accessible. That's a business model as well as an idea and an approach to say what is working today is not getting enough people into the system that need to be in the system. And so when you put a technologist hat on and figure out how to close that gap while at the same time creating a great experience, I think there's great opportunity. And the last point, just amplifying what everyone's saying about, being new, a different voice. Now is the time. From a DE&I perspective, the one thing that I do see is I see a lot more intentionality from employers of all sizes, because it's a clear recognition that the marketplace is increasingly made up, and the spending power that is available in all these communities is there, but you got to be able to reach it, and you got to understand the kinds of experiences people have. And not everyone can speak to every background and experience. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion is real, and it's valuable. And the smart companies, ours inclusive, know that the better companies are the ones that are the most diverse, and get those voices in the building, keep them there, and empower and enable them to get to the levels where they can make decisions. And don't let the fact that you haven't done something be a barrier. My transition from law to business was not the traditional one, but I think Ariva said it. At the end of the day, I believe if you have a functional skill set combined with a work ethic and a willingness in some cases to kind of fall down because you can get back up, there's no experience that is beyond your reach. You just have to be intentional and willing to do the work, which you all are. That's why you are where you are, and that's why you're participating in this program.
I love it. That'll be the final word. So with that, I'd like to bring back up NextCube CEO Marlon Evans, who will transition us to the Entrepreneurs Roundtable. But before I go, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Mercedes, Isaac, Ariva, Tal. It's been a great discussion, and like I said, I was really excited to have you guys join and have such an amazing group of folks to speak about health and wellness and the future thereof. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank all of you for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Marlon.
Thank you.
Mercedes, Isaac, and Tal.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it. All of you, meeting all of you and working alongside you. All the best.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thank you so much, Danny, for facilitating such a great panel. And now we kind of transition from the industry kind of level conversation to speaking specifically to entrepreneurs, journey. As you think about the students in the audience who are joining us about launching their own businesses, this will be an opportunity for us to get kind of really, really tactical and hear from the experiences of entrepreneurs who are in the thick of it right now. Want to welcome, for the folks who have joined a little bit late, welcome you to the Digital Health and Wellness webinar brought to you by NextCube and our HBCU Founders Program. Shout out to all the folks who are listening in via the recording, as well as through HBCU Nation. So with that, I'll bring up Candice Blackhaul, who is at the Morehouse School of Medicine. She also has her own business. So she's going to be the moderator of this great entrepreneur panel, and I'll turn it over to Candice and allow her to bring up the panelist.
Yes. Thank you so much, Marlon. So excited to be back with the NextCube community and continue this very important conversation. I hope you all are feeling as inspired as I am. I am Candice. I'm a MD MBA student at Morehouse School of Medicine, but also at Georgia Tech Scheller College of Business for my business degree. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of GABA, which is a platform that uses machine learning to match medical trainees to study tools and support services. And I am so excited to be introducing 3 other dynamic leaders that are working in the digital health space and really creating a path forward into the better future. So with that, I would love to invite Rodney, Travis, and Veronica to turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves and do us the great service of telling a little bit about yourselves, starting with Rodney.
Okay, let's see. For some reason, the video's, okay, here you go. The video is not starting for us.
Uh-oh. There we go.
There it is.
See you now. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? I'm Rodney Bell. I am a Howard University graduate. I am the co-founder of Butterfly Health. And you just heard from my co-founder and sister, Ariva Martin. So we are a brother and sister tandem who founded Butterfly Health. This is my 3rd shot at being an entrepreneur. I've successfully had 2 exits. So I've been doing this for about 10 years now, being part of the startup ecosystem. So yeah, Butterfly has been quite the journey. It's been about a year now that we started. and it's been nothing but amazing. Lots of lessons learned, lots of difficult times, but lots of amazing times with a great future ahead of us. And we think the opportunities in the digital health space are absolutely enormous. And I'd be glad to help in any way I can to answer any questions any of the students may have or anyone else to see if we can't really help you better equip yourself to undertake this journey as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Rodney. Veronica, why don't you go ahead and take up for us?
Okay, well, I am a Panther. I'm a Clark Atlanta grad. So
My son went there.
so I'm excited. I was excited about this because I'm like, okay, now I can tell everybody I'm from Clark Atlanta and get this thing rolling. But I'm founder and CEO of True Diary. We are a prenatal risk assessment and monitoring platform. We use AI technology to detect early high risk warning indicators in first trimester. And so I've had a few companies. So I've had a long entrepreneur journey, but we are focused on prenatal care at this point. And I'm just happy to be here to answer any questions and help.
Happy to have you. Welcome. And Travis, with this amazing Game of Thrones background, please take it home.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be participating in this. I did not go to an HBCU. I went to University of Texas, but both my parents went to Jackson State University. And so I do have some roots there. I am the CTO and CEO of Tribe Health Solutions, and what we focus on is the management of healthcare data from the perspective of the individual. So, in order to achieve any of the objectives that we've talked about here today, one major change that needs to happen is that individuals need to have immediate access to their entire longitudinal history of medical data and be able to share that with any particular collaborator they want, be it a healthcare provider or anything else. And so we are building the software tools to enable that. And as one of the lessons we've learned, you have to adapt to the times. And with regard to COVID, we handle laboratory testing for results for COVID tests. We tokenize those so you can present yourself as being COVID negative. And then we do exposure notifications and COVID contact tracing. And as an entry point into disrupting the data management for that piece to allow us an entry point into then expanding to manage the rest of your data.
Awesome. Welcome all. Now we're going to run this buffet style. I will not make your plate. So when I ask these questions, jump in wherever you see fit. Okay. First question I want to ask, because you all have had such dynamic careers and journeys, is to tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. Did you have any entrepreneurial endeavors in college, and how did that work out for you?
Well, I guess I'll start. I have always looked at myself as an entrepreneur. So when I was a teenager, I started a t-shirt company and borrowed money from my parents. And they were surprised because I would just go around to different storefronts and sell t-shirts. And it got to the point where we were able to sell t-shirts on military bases.
Wow.
So I've always loved entrepreneurship and always knew that I would be an entrepreneur at heart. And what I would say is kind of what the other panelists said, the business panelists. We all know, you kind of know if you're an entrepreneur because I've been in corporate America for a long time, and I just never was settled in corporate America. And I always did well, but I was never settled. And I was missing something. And I knew what it was. It was being a leader, being able to create something, and being able to run a team to greatness. And so that's what I strive to do. So that's kind of what my path was.
That's awesome.
And I guess I'll go next. My entrepreneurship journey really started in high school. I've been writing software since I was around 8 years old, so I'm kind of different from most. in that way. And my father and I actually came up with a software program to analyze geological data to do predictions on whether there is oil in a particular, geographic area.
Yeah.
And I had done an internship with Ohio, Center of Ohio at the time. And we came up with this idea because it used to take several weeks to process the data that you need to process in order to make these predictions. And we had gotten it down to a few hours with our software based on this particular data set that came from a company that was in Colorado. Well, that worked beautifully for a little bit, and we were about to go sell it. But this is our first learning when it comes to entrepreneurship world, and that is that when you depend on resources from some other entity, and that entity folds up, then you've got some issues, right? That's exactly what happened. And so to fast forward a little bit in my career to about 1999. At that time, I owned a company that was devoted to doing consulting on video streaming type software. And with my experience of having written a lot of video streaming stuff for Microsoft products, I actually wrote the software that Mark Cuban sold to Yahoo in 1999. And so I had wrote all the software for him for that. And that's my next lesson. And that is you want to be Mark Cuban. You don't want to be the guy who enables Mark Cuban. I made like $1.5 million that year. He made $4 billion.
Oh, wow.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
That's a big
Lots
difference.
of zeros.
Exactly. And so what I would stress to everyone here that is listening, it doesn't matter whether you have the technical chops to execute on a thing that is your idea. Having the idea and simply being persistent in acquiring the knowledge, team, and resources to execute on it, that's the most important thing. Because I've been writing software for a variety of people for a long time. I've made like 3 different people billionaires, and it's time now for me to do it for myself. And I want to communicate that to all of you. All it takes is for you to be persistent and pay attention and just don't give up. And so with that, this is my second company. Tribe Health is my second venture. My first venture was something called Tribe Media, where I wrote the first live video streaming app in the Apple App Store in 2014. It predates, Facebook Live and Periscope and all of those that came probably about 2 years afterward. And the idea was that we would use this to let celebrities stream themselves live to their fans and their fans pay a subscription fee for this.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
We ran it for 1.5 years, but we had a couple of issues. We were first. That's the next thing I would like to say is that a lot of times it's not the first guy who makes the money. A lot of times it's the second guy who learns from the first guy. Yeah. And so that's where customer identification is extremely important. In understanding your customer dynamic and how comfortable they are in consuming what you give them to get the value they're looking for. And that's where we probably learned a few lessons there. But I turned around and took that software for that after we kind of shut that down. But I still use it now. It is the basis for our telemedicine solution for Tribe Health. We use that same platform to allow you to do video conference securely, through our telemedicine engine. So that's that's kind of like my history with entrepreneurship. Lots of lessons learned, and then don't forget to go get your funding. I would say that I spent a lot of time. If there was a mistake that I made throughout all this time I've been an entrepreneur, is to think you can work a full-time job somewhere and bootstrap something that's going to end up being millions of dollars, right? The truth is, you'll never get to flip that way. You have to make a decision to get support for what you're doing by getting the funding, because getting the funding is part of your customer validation. Because if you get someone smart money to agree to finance what you're doing, then you've got a shot, right? And that's the little nugget I would say there.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Lots of wisdom in that. Rodney, do you want to join in on that, or you want us to keep on trucking?
Let's keep trucking. I'm learning as they're talking. Let's
You
keep going.
sure?
I'll get the next one.
You sure? I know you have some pearls in there. 3 exits.
No, well, I'm not sure about pearls. My path was very different than both you've heard. I started off in a more traditional manner as an investment banker working in New York and Boston. And one of the companies that the firm I was working for at the time invested in a startup in Santa Monica, California. And that's kind of where my journey in the entrepreneurship world began, because I was charged with covering that company. And I ended up moving to Santa Monica to manage that investment that our company had made. And long story short, I ended up becoming the CEO of that company and helped that company do a divestiture of its assets. And we sold their assets to Oracle at the time. And from there is kind of where I caught the entrepreneurship fever, if you will. So that kind of led me to start 2 other companies. So that was my first exit. Then we did one more company that we sold to NBC Universal. And now I'm doing this Butterfly Health with my sister. So all the journeys led to the same place, I guess, but the 3 of us took different paths.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing. So something that I know people don't talk about often is you can be an entrepreneur and actually buy someone else's failed startup and just and make a twist. And so I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of people don't explore that when they're thinking about starting their venture. There's a lot of free code out there, if you will, of things that were and are just waiting for someone to dust them off and start again. And that is a route forward. So of course, I think we talked a little bit about this, but I want to really focus in on what were the challenges and surprises that you faced specifically as a digital health entrepreneur.
For us, the challenge, for me particularly, the challenge was not necessarily access to capital or capital providers, because we know that space pretty well. But really just understanding the speed with which the digital technology space is moving. And the digital health space is moving so rapidly and so quickly. And the area in which we work in the behavioral health space is so dynamic, and there's so many players. Trying to find and carve out a niche in that marketplace was one of the biggest challenges for us. So as we looked at the opportunities that were available to us, we really chose to laser focus on one segment of the population. That's the population we call underserved populations, which are primarily Medicaid populations throughout America. So when you talk about obstacles and challenges, I think one of the things that a young entrepreneur needs to really understand is market fit and opportunity. Where can you make an impact? So trying not to be a generalist, but really understanding where you fit and where you can make an impact. So that's been a lesson for us that we've learned over the time.
Thanks.
I think a lesson for me, a challenge, obviously funding is always a challenge. And what I would say for young entrepreneurs, it's great to have an idea. I mean, we all had ideas, and then, you think you're going to save the world, and then reality sets in. And so I think what I would say is time is of the essence, and can't get time back. So really be specific and intentional on who your funders are, where you're going to find them, and if they're a good fit for you. It's, for me, it's funders that look like me. For me, it's funders that, are on board with my vision, because you get more than money when you deal with people like that. You're going to get resources. You're probably going to get your first customers. You're going to get partnerships. And that can shave off a year of wasted time. So for me, it's, I would say those were lessons for me, is to be very intentional about how I'm going to raise money, be very intentional on who I'm going to target, and be mindful of not wasting time.
Yeah, I have to add to both of those. Both of those offerings were really important. I would add to that to say that when it comes to the healthcare industry, a thing that we learned right away is that we had an idea that with regard to the management of individuals' medical data, we're going to start with medical imaging. Everyone agreed this is a big problem. We want to solve it, all that kind of stuff. The problem in healthcare is this: while there is a lot of movement with regard to innovation, adoption is very slow. So as a result, you have to pick when you talk about picking your funders and also picking your point of disruption that you're going to attack. The important thing is to have a place to start where there's a forcing function for the adoption of the idea that you're trying to bring forth. And sometimes that forcing function may not be your original idea. You might have to pivot just a little, because to give you our example, one of the issues we had was that was dealing with EMR vendors. Like when you're going to deal with, if you're going to collect everyone's medical data, and you're going to create an ecosystem around that data, well, that's a beautiful idea. Could be radical when it comes to changing how we deliver healthcare in the context of everything we've talked about today. Problem is that the current machinery behind healthcare is oriented around the silos of that data. EMR companies need that data to stay in their silo so that they can have their captive audience, which are the healthcare systems that in hospitals and medical care providers that buy from them. Yeah. Right. So innovation and integration, which is good for everybody, is horrible for them.
Yes.
And at some point, it's also not so great for healthcare providers, individual healthcare providers and healthcare systems, because that's how they keep you captive. You want to go get to a doctor who's in another place, they have your data. And you know what? The current law says they got 30 days to turn it over. Well, and as a result, you just decide, oh, I'm just going to stay here because I can't get my data moved over. And so there's resistance to these changes. When the CMS has been trying to move from a model of fee for service to value-based care, which requires that data be handled differently. And the laws have been started in 2010. The laws related to ensuring that people can get better access more immediately to their EMR-based medical data. In each case, there have been extensions to those laws and all that, and EMR systems have resisted it to the point that just last year, 60 of them wrote Congress and said, please cut off this integration thing, stonewall, right? So they can, so that they can have time to, respond to their function becoming a commodity as opposed to a high price specialty service. Well, the forcing functions, though, against that are things like the pandemic. As soon as you have pandemic, man, you can't be messing around with data being siloed in places. You got to have it available to everybody. You got to be able to have pipelines that push that data to the CDC, to the state health departments, so that we can do something to get this pandemic under control. And that's where we have pivoted. But there's other forcing functions as well, like telemedicine is a forcing function. As soon as COVID hit, well, seeing doctors in person is something people want to avoid as much as possible. So now you've got to do telemedicine. There's lots of other aggregate effects to COVID in digital health, just related to the fact that, just everything being done remotely. There's so many opportunities here, not just in digital health, but in education and in entertainment and other places that are driven by this COVID crisis. It's like the best time, in history, really, to start one of these businesses. Just in the third quarter of this past year, a record $21.8 billion was passed out to digital health startups. Money is out there. You just have to have the idea. You have to have the focus, and part of your focus is being laser focused on a specific pain point where you can start the disruption. But ironically, you got to be a little bit schizophrenic. At the same time, you have to say, okay, what is our 5-10-year plan where you get a 10x or 100x return on your investment, which requires that you have a longer term vision that may take time for adoption. So you got to have a quick, way to get into revenue, and then with an eye and to present for massive growth over time.
Yeah. that it was like we were like sharing a brain just now, because that was a perfect segue into my next question, which is how has COVID really affected your business, and how have you had to pivot at all as a result of COVID entering into the global arena?
Oh yeah, we had to pivot right away. We were about, I mean, in January of this year, we were about to release our first pilot for professional athletes to manage their MRIs and medical records on our platform, including aggregating data you get from wearables like the Aura Ring and all that to help you manage performance and your sleep and all of these things.
Yeah.
Well, COVID happened and nobody's going to the gym now, right? The leagues stopped. I mean, there was no one to use our product, so we had to figure out, what are we going to do? And our immediate first pivot was, well, as I said before, I already had my video streaming infrastructure and everything that I had built previously. So we said, okay, let's do telemedicine. And we're still going to do telemedicine, but our first attempt at getting some traction there were a little bit thwarted by the fact that the CMS and the FDA allowed for everyone to use insecure, non-HIPAA compliant methods to do telemedicine because it's an emergency. Right? So you can do FaceTime, you can do anything you want. So as a result, we didn't get people were interested, but they were like, I'm just going to do the easy thing because it's a crisis, and and they also revenues were going down for our customers, right? Because they have visits and all that kind of stuff. So we said, all right, we're still going to do that. We need a forcing function to force adoption for our telemedicine, which we know is going to stay. That's where COVID came in. COVID requires what we're doing. We found some traction in the state of Mississippi and some other places where they want to do COVID tracking and tracing, and then interact with businesses to allow them to affect the economy to stay open, because they have our Tribe Pass to allow you to demonstrate you're COVID negative. And now we're starting to get some traction. And it's obviously, as soon as you get a COVID test that goes positive, what's the first thing you're going to need? Well, some telemedicine.
Yeah. What about you, Veronica, Rodney? Had any changes with COVID?
So my change has been a little bit different. So we didn't go the COVID route because we talked to a lot of our mentors who are actually OBGYNs, and they wanted us to really stay true to focusing on early risk, high risk pregnancy. They felt that we did not have to add a COVID component. It was going to be what it was. If a woman was at high risk, they were going to treat that. And if COVID was part of it, they would take care of that as well. But what COVID did do, it allowed us to really hone in on our specific business of early risk detection. And we made a slight pivot to first trimester as opposed to second and third trimester. A lot of our customers and partners really wanted us to focus on getting those detections earlier as opposed to later. So as a result, we have been able to gain some new partnerships with hospitals in Georgia, and we were able to really solidify or make a partnership that we had a little bit stronger because of our champions. So I would say that was the biggest change in what we were doing because of COVID.
Great. Way to think on your toes. Rodney, what about you? Any
Sure.
changes?
No, COVID actually just helped accelerate some of our efforts, actually, because of, again, the communities which we serve and this Medicaid population. Medicaid rolls were about 70 million Americans maybe a year ago. Since COVID, that number has grown to around 90 million because of displacement from job loss and unemployment and those sorts of things associated with COVID. So for us, it just accelerated our kind of go-to-market strategy, and it really kind of pushed some of our would-be pilot partners to move quicker and faster to close that loop between discussion and implementation. Yeah. So while unfortunate from a healthcare standpoint, COVID has really been something that's really pushed our business further than held it back.
Awesome. That's always good to hear.
Yeah.
we're going to shift a little bit from kind of the global context to more of a personal context. And so, what has your experience been as an underrepresented founder in digital health?
For me, it's been it's interesting. As I said, I started down this path years ago, and I would go to pitch sessions or whatever the case might be in Silicon Valley or in what we call Silicon Beach here in Santa Monica, California. And I'd be the only Black person in the room or in the neighborhood for that matter, in some instances. That really hasn't changed that much, to be honest with you. But because of social unrest, because of some of the Black Lives Matter movements that have taken place and those sorts of good things, at least there's lots of investors who are at the very least paying lip service to an inclusive investment community. And that's gotten us lots of more meetings. I don't think it's tangibly impacted the check writing ability. I think that people who've written us checks will written us checks regardless. So I do think it's interesting to hear all this fun stuff about, inclusion, diversity. My personal opinion is it's still primarily lip service.
Hey, I'm with it.
Yeah, I'm being honest about it.
I'm with it.
I'll piggyback on Rodney. You will read articles about Black founders, minority founders, and the number is the same. And it's been the same since I started my company a few years ago. We get 2% of investments. And so obviously that's a problem.
Yeah.
If we're only getting 2%,
Yeah.
of the pot. And so again, I would echo what I said earlier. You have to, when you're looking at funders, and Rodney brought up Silicon Valley. So people always say, the Silicon Valley way. I don't know what they're talking about because I never grew up in Silicon Valley. I never, grew up with, per se, friends and family, people who could give me money. And I, in my family or friends and say to them, when we exit, you'll get your money back. That's not my world. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you're looking at things from a Black founder standpoint, there are so many guidelines that are put on you before you even walk in the room that really just don't apply to you. Mm-hmm. They just don't. And so that's why for me, it's important to really, have funders connect with funders that relate to you and really are focused on believing in your vision. And I think for me, that happened to me. I had a funder who looked like me, who loved my vision, who related to prenatal care because, that happened to her. Mm-hmm. So it was easy for her to say, you know what, I really want to help you. And that just never happened before. Right. It was always a struggle to get a meeting. And kind of like what Rodney said, it was just a lot of lip service. You take a meeting and you knew walking out of the room that you're not getting this investment. Why do we even, do this? So, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. I can't agree enough. I definitely wish there was a way to track if all of this marketing is really turning into action. Because
I will say this, a lot, it has brought attention for a lot of companies. I mean, you're talking about Google. Google has put a lot of money behind minority founders, and they are doing more than just giving money. And I'll make this point. It's incredible when you can get funding and you don't have to worry about giving equity away. Mm-hmm. And you can just roll up your sleeves and get to work. Mm-hmm. That's part of the problem because it's sometimes it's hard to get funding. Sometimes, you have to, when you have to start and stop and start and stop, it just makes it that more difficult to reach milestones, as opposed to, you know, being able to, because for all of us, if we take money out of it and someone said, hey, I just want you to get to work, do your business, don't worry about money, we'd all be unicorns right now.
Yeah.
Literally, because you took that, the challenge that most of us have, out of the equation. And so when you're able to do that, you don't have to worry about, you know, investment, and you can just really get to work. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I would
Travis.
say I would agree with both of them. I have a thing to say about when it comes to the difficulty of funding and ways to look at it. Because being Black, we're going to have less access to automatic funding. I mean, because most of these companies that, you know, these start up, you have, say it's a white guy, he probably has a high degree of probability that he's got an uncle or somebody who's got a couple $100,000 to let him have to just play with his idea and get to a point where then he can attract other capital. And he's already miles ahead of all of us when it comes to walking in the room and attracting millions of dollars of capital with just a you know, a little bit of idea on a napkin and a PowerPoint. And so and I see that all the time. You say, oh, this is so unfair. But I think there's another way for us to look at it. There is a power that we have as a people that comes from our history, our long hundreds of years history of overcoming. Right? We know, I've been taught since I was a little kid that, you know, you've got to be twice as good as the next guy in order to get the same thing. But you know what? Being twice as good, especially today, is worth a lot of money because people have become more lazy over time, and we are not lazy, and eventually that shows up. And eventually it's the reason why we will dominate, especially in areas of like digital health, entertainment, and digital anything. If we convert that mindset of overcoming into saying, you know what, I'm going to create my own distribution channel. Once you create your own distribution channel, your own ecosystem around the data you're collecting or the people you serve, well, now you're not beholden to the establishment with regard to how you get funding or anything else. You generate your own. And so that's what I would say is this, you know, through this tough process, become a beast at what it is you do, and just don't give up, because eventually, you know, you'll get an opportunity, you'll jump on it, and you will then be ahead of everyone else who just had an uncle throw them $200,000 but they're not really so confident.
Yeah, yeah, that's an awesome way to think about it. And I'm sure it's very inspiring to many of the students that are listening and thinking about starting their own ventures, because a lot of times you get overwhelmed by just the thought of starting and already kind of being disadvantaged. And so with that, you know, what advice do you have for the collegiates that may be listening that are thinking about starting their first venture?
Start
I
now.
would
Start. Great point.
I would say again, and I'm going to keep saying this, really have a strategic plan on how you're going to fundraise. If that's what, you know, the early in your company, it's critical to really have a plan and know who you're going to target, if you're going to target anyone, because that's when you give away most of your equity. I mean, you know, you may do an accelerator that may, you know, take 6 to 10%. You know, angel investors are going to take bigger percentages of your company. So I would say definitely have a plan for fundraising. Pitch competitions are great for first-time entrepreneurs. Get with, I always say, have a startup mentor, and I'm not necessarily talking about people who might have sold $1 billion company or anything like that. You may, you know, if you're just starting, get with a founder who might be at the seed stage or who might be at Series A, because they can give you a wealth of knowledge and information that would help you avoid any pitfalls that you know you may encounter. I wish I had that when I first started my company. I would also say get involved in communities, Slack channels. I'm a part of 8 communities, and a lot of the resources that I have been able to take advantage of, I found out through my communities. So there are a lot of opportunities, grants, challenges where you can get money, pitch competitions, you know, just credits, accelerators that you may not have known about because they're really not advertised, and people really don't share that information unless you're in their communities. So I would say just get involved in a communities, you know, maybe 2 or 3 of them, and you will get a wealth of knowledge and information that can help you scale your business without giving away a lot of equity early on.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Any final add-ons to that, those words of wisdom?
No, just what Travis said, start now. Don't be afraid. Just take the chance, take the risk. You're very young in this journey. There's lots of room for mistakes, and hopefully you'll make lots of mistakes. And from those mistakes, you will learn lots as well.
Yeah. Travis, anything else?
Yes, hey, once again, start now.
Listen.
I can't stress that enough, because you guys out there who are students, you're in that perfect little, time period where you're kind of an adult, but not an adult. You don't have all the 100% responsibilities. You don't have kids. You don't have any other things to inhibit you. Take advantage of that time now to produce something, and just start producing something, sell something. Even if you don't go the full route to begin with, but make sure at the same time you continue and finish your education and have that apply to what it is that is your vision.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I can't tell you enough how much it means for you all to come out and share your time and your insights. We could be here all night and have so many conversations, but we are running out of time. So because I know so many of the listeners are going to want to connect with you all, what are some ways that our viewers or our listeners can connect with you after this conversation to continue the discussion?
Well, feel
Yeah,
free to,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Travis. Sorry.
feel free to email me at travis@tribehealthsolutions.com. Is a part of my passion to participate in things like this and help youngsters do what what I'm now doing at 51. You all can do that at 20, 26, and all. And so just email me there with any questions you have.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm easy, Rodney@butterfly.com. And on the NextCube website, there's a listing for Butterfly Health there. You can contact us through NextCube or directly, either way.
Cool.
And you can contact me at vberry@truediary.com.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much for being here again. It means a lot. I hope the viewers are taking away a lot of awesome things. I'm going to turn it over to Marlon, to Jade, who's going to take us home for the evening. So thanks again, y'all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Candice, and thank you so much, Entrepreneur Roundtable participants. This has been so phenomenal. And so we have just a few quick announcements for everyone listening. So tomorrow we will be having office hours for all of the participants in the HBCU Founders Program. So be sure to tune in there tomorrow and bring your business ideas and your questions. We will be there ready to assist you. And then after that, starting next week, we will be having our property technology session, which is really exciting. It's going to be the last webinar of the series. And so we have some great guests that will be tuning in and really speaking, some great panelists from Airbnb and Zillow, Quicken Loans. And then we also have some great entrepreneurs from our Entrepreneur Roundtable. And then lastly, coming up soon, the applications will be going live for the summer acceleration program. So this is your opportunity to be able to receive $10,000 in funding for your business ideas. A really great opportunity. So make sure you are on our email list. If you would like to sign up for the program, go to nextcube.com/HBCU via this link here. And you can make sure that you are receiving all communications for when that acceleration program releases. So thank you guys again for tuning in. This has been such an amazing program, and we will see you right back here next week for our final webinar, which is property technology. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in live, and thank you to everyone who is streaming via HBCU Nation. Have a great rest of your evening.